We are now live and we're waiting for our wonderful attendees to file in. Welcome.
Welcome, yay.
Yay. Cool, all right, our participants are going up. I'm just gonna hold for a second. Welcome everybody, happy Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining us. It's nice to feel like we have a packed house, even though we're all in our very own houses far away. Good evening. My name is Amy DeBalos, also known as Amy D. Thank you for joining us in this new season of San Jose Jazz Backstage. Backstage is a series of discussions by musicians and for musicians, founded as a community platform in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. We explored racism and activism in jazz with season 1 in July, specifically the ways systemic racism can impact our experience as performers and purveyors of Black American music. Backstage seeks to further the dialogue happening in our communities right now, on and off stage. We encourage you to participate tonight using the Q&A function on Zoom, which you can find on the bottom bar of your window. And this season, our discussion tonight and the next 2 sessions we have the following 2 Tuesdays, we'll dive into the topic of mentorship. It's a thread that runs through the tradition of jazz. And at its best, mentorship can encourage growth and personal development in performance and educational settings. In times of social unrest, how can we learn from those who came before us? And how can we lead the next generation? How can mentorship help us foster awareness and inclusion? The views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily reflect the official views of San Jose Jazz. And I just want to thank San Jose Jazz and the artist-led committee who made these conversations possible. And before we dive in, please help me welcome the Executive Director of San Jose Jazz, Brendan Rossen, if he is here with us. I don't know. Actually don't see him. I don't think he signed on, but he would have graciously shared some words with us tonight, and so I'll move on. But thank you, Brendan, for supporting us in this effort as well. As a reminder, we encourage you to participate and ask questions throughout the oh, Brendan's right there. But are you a panelist? That's my question. Okay, you're sending your regards from the chat. Awesome. So we encourage you to participate with us throughout the discussion and ask questions through the Q&A function, and we will move on to Q&A at about 45 minutes into the discussion. Tonight, we have Slow and Steady Records, a San Francisco-based label founded by multi-instrumentalist and educator Stephen Lugerner and trumpeter Ross Eustis. So welcome Stephen and Ross, as well as some of the artists from Slow and Steady, Naomi Moon Siegel, Valerie, Troutt, and Henry Hung. And I just want to start by having a little chat with Stephen and Ross. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Great
yeah, so I'd love to hear more about Slow and Steady Records, and I'm sure the South Bay community and the Greater Bay Area would love to know, like, how did the record label start and how might mentorship inform the work you do with artists?
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks for having us. Thank you to San Jose Jazz for hosting this. And thank you to Ross for joining, and my great friends and colleagues, Naomi, Henry, Valerie. This is gonna be a great conversation. Let's see, Slow and Steady. We started the record label back in 2018, the fall of 2018, and it really just kind of stemmed out of myself and a lot of friends and colleagues finishing up albums at sort of around the same time and not really knowing what to do with them. And we essentially, well, I sort of emailed Ross many times, and we sort of communicated about this idea, decided to start the label and kind of just launch it with just a handful of artists.
Stephen's first note to me was something like, hey, I have this crazy idea.
Yeah, and so we kicked it off in fall of 2018. To date, we've put out 19 albums, which feels like a lot, and that's like it's kind of surreal. Definitely check out more if you're curious to know about the specific music and the artists. Definitely check out our website, slowandsteadyrecords.com. And I would say in terms of mentorship and how that theme has sort of come up with the label, every artist that has come to us has come to us in sort of varying levels of completeness, or in terms of their vision for their album or the project that they're working on. And some, like, I would think, like, looking back on things, like, I feel like Naomi and Valerie had like a really clear vision for what they wanted to do, and we just kind of helped add fuel to that fire. And for other artists, though, I think one main theme that has popped up is that artists tend to just be focused on just the music aspect, just the audio, and once they're done with that, they want to put it out. And we get a lot of emails from artists saying something to the effect of like, hey, I've got this record, I want to put it out next month. And that's when I think we sort of step in as the mentor. And maybe I'll pass it off to Ross, and Ross can talk more about like the details of what we mentor our artists through.
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, there's a number of areas that we step in and I wouldn't say hold their hand necessarily, but try to understand the artist's goals and intention with the release is one of the first questions, and then helping them realize their goals, and empower them, and as Stephen already mentioned, add fuel to what they already have going. But part of it is also there's kind of best practices and ways to approach. I think we're continuing like an ever changing and evolving music industry, especially since digital music has taken off. In particular, all the different platforms you can use, the platforms that tend to be friendlier to independent artists, where you might actually have your music kind of featured or brought to an audience that's different than your friends and family and people you're already connected with on Facebook. How can we bring new listeners to the artist's music? And that's also one of the intentions of the label is if we're all kind of in our own silos in our own music communities, and actually before this conversation we were all chatting just among us and just talking about how musicians in San Jose might not necessarily be hanging and playing in San Francisco, might not necessarily be Oakland or Berkeley based musicians, or people a little bit farther out in the Bay. So how can we pool together our audiences that if somebody is digging Naomi's record or Valerie's, that they might also be curious to explore other albums that have been put out on Slow and Steady. And with that, we try to maintain a level of quality and integrity in the artists and the releases that are featured on it as well. There's definitely a lot of creative and hardworking artists in the Bay Area, and we're trying to kind of link together as much as possible and build community in that way. And now we're all disconnected right now, but we've also tried to put together events and gigs that feature bills that maybe wouldn't otherwise happen. And then going back to how we work with artists, generally not best practice to put out your record next week or in kind of a 1 month time. But the whole aesthetic and visual side of it, the media that goes along with the releases, the timeline by which you're sending it out to press and following up with them, how you release singles. I mean, there's kind of an endless checklist. Well, not an endless checklist, but we've created a checklist that is one of the resources that we share with the artists, and from the get-go, to make sure that all this stuff is on their radar, and they're also willing to commit to kind of all the things that we feel is necessary in putting something out in the right way. So it's something that Steve and I are constantly developing and kind of perfecting on our own and building on. And as we learn with the art from the artists we work with and their releases, and as we learn from doing our own efforts with our own respective projects, we're kind of just putting all that knowledge kind of into one place that we can tap into and share with artists. So several of many things that we try to do with folks in the community here. And we've also expanded outside the Bay Area. Originally, it was mostly Bay Area artists that we were working with. But Naomi, who's on the call, who you all will hear in a sec, she was in the Seattle scene, which is actually where I grew up. She was in the Seattle scene for a long time, and now she's based in Montana. Valerie's Bay Area native, was out in New York, and is based in Oakland. That's correct, Valerie? Yeah. And Henry, I know has been in San Francisco for a long time. It's been going back and forth. I'll let him tell his own story. But anyways, I feel like I've done enough talking. We can move into mentorship and talking with the artists we brought together today.
Yeah, and before I hop off, I just want to say thank you, Ross and Stephen, for joining us. The whole philosophy behind these next 3 sessions of Backstage is bringing people who we think are leaders and beacons for our jazz and music community in the Bay Area and beyond to lead these discussions. So thank you for that. And also, as an artist myself, I can really appreciate the way that you guys go about supporting artists as a label. So I'm really excited to hear the rest of the discussion tonight. And thank you again to everyone who was involved in this. And I'll be back in a little bit for the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah,
thanks, Amy.
So we've got a couple questions that we have kind of figured out beforehand. I'm going to throw a curveball into the first question, though. First question, let's do a 2-part. Maybe we can all introduce yourself when it's your turn, and maybe you could briefly talk about maybe a way that Slow and Steady has mentored you in your process with your own albums. And then the second part of the question is maybe a little more generic. How has mentorship played a role in your artistic journey? Does anybody want to volunteer to go first? Let's go, Valerie. Yeah.
My name is Valerie Troutt, and I am from Oakland, California. I'm a jazz soul vocalist and composer and artivist. For me, no separation really between the work that I'm doing musically and then my activism. They show up together, and that's how I have been brought up to understand jazz and Black music as a community music, something that moves the spirit, that is alive. It's always a work in progress, something that's always building community. Slow and Steady, mentorship. Guidance that I have from Slow and Steady, just from the gate, Ross was talking, just like the package that they send to you right up front that outlines, boom, bam, shabam. I mean, like the things that they expect, or the things that they are envisioning, and this is co-creating. It's not like they're here, this is the way it has to be, and I think in mentorship and in relationships that is super important to have flexibility. So there's content and there is flexibility in terms of like what a person needs or how a person feels, or we're able to talk about assumption, that kind of thing, which I think is important in business, period. But for me, that type of mentorship, because I have been in the game just not that long, I've been out here for, for a minute, but to have folk come in my life and say, hey, we acknowledge you, right? We see some of the things that you've done, or tell us some of the things that you've done. And then we'd like to show you this, and perhaps we could make something together, to push out this album next month. No, they didn't say next month. But to put it out, for me was is really huge and super needed. So mentorship for me is about organization. It's that other person being able to hold you where you didn't even know you might need to be held, or offering suggestions and ideas about what you are providing, and highlighting the different aspects of you that you want people to see, that maybe somebody else has ignored, and really allowing you to shine. And then what was the other part of that question, Stephen?
Other part of the question is, how has mentorship played a role in your artistic journey?
Okay. Seriously, from just being brought up as a little girl, going to key centers, to church, mentorship. You can, in my life, I can, if I were to draw a map from Sister So and So in the third pew at Love Center Church, or the mother that drove us to choir rehearsal, that kind of thing. I have a lot of mentors in my life, and the ones that really themselves in me really came to me and showed out. And one was a man named Pastor Tom Harris, who really loved jazz and gave me my first Etta Jones cassette tapes, and bought me tickets to see Betty Carter and that kind of thing. So his mentorship was like, I want to put you up on game, like listening, like get your ear up, check out these artists, because I didn't actually know where I was going with it at that age. 12, 13, 14, I was not aware. So that type of mentorship was like, giving me all of the nutrients, to be able to build up, an amazing palette, you know what I mean? So mentorship has been everything. I can think of most of the people that have really helped to shape me. Kevin Mahogany, I met him at Stanford Jazz Workshop. Madeline Eastman, Linda Tillery, Diane Reeves, all of these different people that have somehow come along, in my journey and said, hey, I hear you and I see you. So that kind of validation has been really amazing. But and also being able to see a reflection of yourself in the music is really huge on many levels. And then also to be able to see the longevity of what you might be able to do with the music and with your lifestyle, and through mentorship has been amazing. To always be able to go back to someone, and not all of my mentors are musicians or artists, to tell you the truth. But some of them are just those ones that you can actually call anywhere, anytime, and then lay the truth out for you like it is. You know what I mean? So mentorship has been a huge part of my life, that has been like almost like a wind, just to really keep pushing you. Yeah.
Thanks, Valerie. Henry, what do you think?
Everything Valerie said. And hi, I'm Henry Hung. I play trumpet. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and that's how you have to say it, everybody. And I came out to the Bay Area around 20 years ago. And Slow and Steady have been great because I was that musician that came to them and said, I have something and I want to release it tomorrow, what should I do? And it was wonderful for Stephen and Ross to be like, that's not how you want to plan this, my friend. It was really important talking to them, mentoring me about the business, because I don't know anything about the business. I was trained to play trumpet and talk about and learn Black American music, and I didn't know anything about the business. I was never taught anything about the business. Is anything that I've learned about releasing an album or what the planning that needs to be done has all come from peer mentorship, talking to our fellow peers in the area who released albums and released music. And I'm so thankful for Stephen and Ross to start slow and steady, because there has been, and Stephen and I, we've talked about this a lot, there's been a lack of being able to promote all the creativity that's been going on in the Bay Area. And so to have this label, to at least have a platform to promote one, has been, I think, a beautiful thing. And for Ross and Stephen to just guide me through how to plan this properly, because you spend a lot of time on your recording, your work, your craft. You should spend as much time learning how to properly promote it and put it out to the world for it to get the most listens and get the largest audience that could or may want to listen to your music. And then, of course, I think the history of jazz and Black American music is the relationship of the mentors. I'm a Chinese American trumpet player growing up on Long Island, and I didn't go to church. My church was the recordings, and I needed mentors to flesh out what that music was for me. And started off with my high school teacher giving me recordings of Woody Shaw and Freddie Hubbard, and said, "You need to listen to this if you're into jazz." And then I heard Lee Morgan, and I learned that was it. And then he said, "Then you need to go to Dave Burns and learn from him, who he was a trumpet player who played with Dizzy, and just learning from him, I felt like I was learning how the musicians, the modern music musicians of the 1940s, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, how they thought through the music, felt through the music, what was important to them." And then I came out to the Bay Area, and 20-something know nothing, and BJ Papa and Bishop Norman Williams gave me gigs, and we played tunes till the wee hours of the morning. And if it wasn't for that mentorship, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And I think that's an intimate, important part of this process. And I'm glad to have had that, and I'm very fortunate to have had that. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Naomi, good evening.
Evening. Yeah, thanks everybody. It's really nice to be here and just be witnessing and hearing everyone's thoughts. My name is Naomi Siegel. I'm from Missoula, Montana, but I think of my musical home as Seattle, although I grew up in the Chicago area and also a little bit in Boston, and just been moving around. But I'm a trombonist, I'm a composer, and I'm heavily influenced by Black music my whole life. And I'll start with Slow and Steady. I too was one of those people who said, "Hey, Steven, you have a record label? I got this album. Let's do it next month." And then I'm Slow and Steady. Good. I can get on board with that. That's nice. That pace. So that was a nice for me right out of the gate. And I can just say, Slow and Steady for me has been a good reflection of mentorship, in the way where to be seen. I think Valerie said this too. Like, mentorship is a lot about being seen and being heard and being validated and being witnessed. And a lot of times as an independent artist, I can share for myself, it can feel lonely. Like I'm just making this music, but it's just like in my little isolated place. And so to be able to share that with Stephen and Ross and to have them get on board and be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's, you're not alone in this. Let's do this as a team. Was huge for me. And also, just learning best practices and having a slower and steadier timeline are things that I really value about their approach, and also about sharing communities. I mean, they mentioned how Slow and Steady, started in the Bay Area, but when Stephen was telling me about it, initially his vision was to be a hub for West Coast music, and so I was like, well, Seattle, Montana, can we be considered West Coast? Now they've Slow and Steady just put out Ray Larson, another Seattle artist, and it's really great to share resources and community, and I think that's what this music has always been about. So much gratitude to Slow and Steady, and mentorship. Yeah, I've been thinking about that in my life, and I think there have been periods, and I even can go back to this sometimes where I think that it has to, like, hi, I'm your mentor, and like this is the official title of our relationship, and that's not really how it has shown up for me. It's been more fleeting, and even sometimes these passing moments where you just get a nugget of gold from somebody. Maybe an elder in the community who's been playing this music for a lot longer. But I will say that I can go back and place moments in my life where maybe I wouldn't be playing trombone right now if it weren't for people who encouraged me. Whether it was that one teacher in high school who said, hey, I'm gonna get you an audition band. I'm gonna help you record an audition tape and get a band together and get you going. Like, oh, okay, great, do this. Or just even learning from like I want to give a shout out to Wendell Logan, who started the jam where I went to college, and he was a Black composer, and he really made it clear, the lineage of this music and all the interrelated strains of Black music and how crucial it is to the music, to all music really, and in this country. And people like that who just share this wisdom where you might not hear it in another way. I might not hear it. I should just speak for myself. I also want to give a shout out to San Jose musician Kristen Strom, who's somebody I met as a young 20-year-old when I was struggling to stay in professional, because I felt really frustrated. I felt like I had to kind of hide who I was in different ways. And I asked her I was like, Chris, how do you do it? Like, you've been playing this music for such a long time, and I had witnessed her and played with her. And she said, I only play music with people who I love and people who love me. And it blew my mind. It was a game changer for me. It's like a really simple concept, but the piece that I had missed growing up learning jazz was how important relationships are, how important the process is. And that's what people like Stephen and Ross are bringing to the forefront, the relationships and the process. And from then on, that was right before I moved to, I sort of changed my approach, and I said, all right, this music is about being vulnerable. It's about being authentic. And that's how mentor relationships really thrive. And that's why they are so valuable. So I'm only going to play music with people where I feel like I can really be myself. And I got nothing to hide. I don't need to pretend that I'm a dude or I'm, whatever. And I'm just going to be myself. And that's how I approached playing in Seattle. And started going to sessions and starting to meet people, and a couple people there that really sort of took me under their wing. One of them was Julian Priester, who was called one day, and I said, hey, do you want to get coffee? Can I take a lesson from you? Do you want to hang out? And he said, let's just hang out. And it started this, series of sessions where we would get together and play standards. And he'd tell me about up in Chicago and playing jazz. And so really grateful for Julian, who just was so warm and accepting right off the bat. He's, just treating me like another trombone player. Also Wayne Horowitz, people and see you and support you and hire you to do gigs. I'll just close this little segment by saying that, we think of mentorship often one person individual relationships, but I also think scenes are places where mentorship happened, and there can be a culture of mentorship within a scene, and that's something I'm grateful for that I found in the Seattle community, where people are sharing resources, going to each other's, sharing stories and supporting each other through challenges. So it's all around.
Thanks, Naomi. Ross, do you have anything to add or want to ask the next question?
Yeah, I'll just, everything that's been said, I think is, we kind of have our own experiences, but there's a lot of similar. I think it's finding people, regardless of, I think mentors is seen as somebody older than you that's, maybe or sees you're definitely true, but I think there's other forms of mentorship that are peer-based, or sometimes somebody's younger than you. And a lot of times it's when that person, and I think Henry spoke to the person that says, the thing at the right moment that just, it's kind of a memory that becomes kind of an anchor for you in your own kind of journey, and you reference back to it. And I've definitely had the moments, and I think more recently in the Bay Area, I think, community through, musicians is how I first met Steven, and people he went to school with that I became connected with in the Bay Area. Specifically, one of the first bands I started playing with, Brass Magic, which released on the label. I think one of the first I got in the Bay was actually from Henry Hung, who had a gig and loved it and just hit me up, and I was within the first year of being in the Bay Area, and it's in the form of that, because now he's a brand, all these musicians never played with, they trust me, so they trust why you're there, and that's how it works in the music scene. I've been more involved with the Jazz Mafia community, and there's a specific vocalist who lives down in LA. This guy Trance Thompson comes up to the Bay and performs a lot. Super talented vocalist and band leader. But one of the things that he's always doing everything for everybody, but it's developed a relationship. He's become an important person, musical mentor for me. And one of the things he always, I'm a player. I always focus on what's happening instrumentally, melodically, harmonic, rhythmically. And he's always are you listening to lyrics? Are you even listening to any of the lyrics right now? And a lot of times I have to just be honest and say, no, I'm not. And it's been a hard lesson for me, because I'm playing a lot of music with him and others that there's a story being told, and I'm not, that's not the thing I'm listening to. But it's not to say that I should only be listening to the lyrics, but it's a core part of tension behind the music, and it can't be separated. So that's been a beautiful lesson for me more recently, to force myself to pay attention to these things that maybe don't naturally. So I'll leave it at that, and I appreciate all those that have been shared. Super inspiring to hear about everybody, the mentors that they had, and Julian Priester is amazing. Played back in the 70s with Herbie and Mullen Dishi, and all a bunch of great stuff. But I'll keep things going, and for the sake of time, I think we've kind of focused on people's own experiences and the mentors they've had. So now I want to flip it and say, ask them, how do you serve as a mentor in your own community, and whether that's via teaching or the scene that you play in, and then specifically, how do you things that are happening in the world, specifically around the Black Lives Matter movement, around social justice. I mean, it could be about the way coronavirus is affecting you. It could be about all these. I mean, this year in particular, there's a lot of things happening to us and our communities, and how do you incorporate those messages and consciousness into the relationships you have as a mentor as well as a mentee. And I don't know if we could go in the same order if you guys want, or we could switch it up. If someone wants to volunteer.
Okay. If I can remember everything. I'm a teacher, so I have a number of students throughout the Bay Area. And one of the things that I like to do is I'm a song care specialist also. So I write music that fits the needs of individual people or community, which for me is just like reading the room, basically. So as a teacher, I'm going in, but I'm also being taught, by my students, by their the conversations that we're holding with each other. So I think holding space for students is really important. That's something that I'm used to. And then actively creating in that moment something that is relevant through music, lyrically with them. So any student of mine that has fire or even taken a private voice lesson will tell you that oh yeah, Miss Valerie, she had, we have to write our own story. We have to tell our own story. So through the blues is a way I definitely bring real life situations and conversation into the classroom and into my private lesson. And I really feel that composition in itself, Amiri Baraka, Leroy Jones, he wrote a brilliant book, right, called Blues People. And he talks about if you trace the music of a people, you'll know where they have been and where they are going, right? So it's, for me, the question is always, who's playing the drums right now? Are there still codes in music? What are we actually saying? And what are you listening to? How's that shaping you? And I feel like by asking those questions, there are certain people, their light will come on. Not everyone might, it's not for everyone to have a one-on-one mentorship, relationship with me or me with them. But those persons who can hear those questions and it falls on their ears in a way that's like, boom, and then they hit me up or something like that, or we're able to continue the conversation. Those persons, I mean, I value all of the relationships that I'm creating with my students, but those ones are the ones that I really want to pay special attention to and check up on. And that through composition, I'm learning who my students are. I'm learning about their lives, and I'm able to bring things into our learning space safely, that is not always able to come up in other environments. So yeah, I work mainly at Eustis Center, Performance Arts Center in Richmond, and predominantly Black youth there. So that's one way. And another way is, just really, I started an organization called Find Your Light, which creates safe space for Black women, digitally and physically. And we created an album of music through another mentorship program, an incubator, Zoo Labs, that is based in West Oakland. And I was allowed to create 14 songs that go with, that bring up relevant conversation, and that also meeting spaces creates intergenerational conversation in safe space to be able to create what we might need as individuals. And this work is specific to women. So is how I've been. This is my niece. I don't know if can you guys hear this bing happening? Think about mentorship. She is 6. It's 7:45. I know she has 15 minutes to go to bed, and but I'm one of her persons that I have a cell phone, and my mother will only let me text 3 people, and Valerie is one of them. So she's gonna hit me up a couple of times before she goes to bed, saying night, what I'm gonna throw back at her. So so yeah, creating resources for my students, and then creating this project, always being open, and my work, it's a battle all the time. Like, I can be open, really open. You know what I mean? Like, I only have these 2 years. So it's really important. I think Henry and Ross and all of us have been talking about relationships, that what really builds anything, and being able to connect how, right? And for me, being able to look back on my life and the relationships that I've been a part of through my church growing up, and even some teachers at school, but not all, because not all teachers at school for me were created safe spaces for me to be who I was. A lot of them did not see me, and some of them saw me and feared me, and I didn't understand that, and they were just mean, or just tired, fed up, with their own life, and projected whatever they could, you know what I mean? So for me, creating new projects and frameworks, and also, especially within jazz, and change some of who people see as leaders, and giving my students an opportunity to shine and take on the role of composing the song, take on the role of putting the event together, or even claiming space for Black women, LGBT youth, and women, and persons of color in community, I think is huge. And so I try to create spaces like that, new platforms, break it up, you know what I mean? So that jazz also has this way to come through that crack, and be able to, be seen in maybe through a different lens, a different, and be touch people, with different ears and different eyes. So I hope that I have somehow talked about the questions that you asked. I think I have. So yeah, for me, there's some people that I really, of my students, I'm like, oh my God, I love you so much. And I give them my phone number and that kind of thing. I've been following her around since I was 12. I didn't get her number till I was probably, 25 or something like that. But she's like, call me anytime, and I can call her anytime and just shoot the breeze. And it's not even about music sometimes, but she be dropping bombs every time we talk, even if it's about frying chicken, you know what I mean? Just being in that space of that, and knowing, that you can create with them even in that moment is really awesome. So I try to create that also for my students. Just having a vision also is really important.
Thanks, Valerie.
Mm-hmm.
dropping bombs too. Henry, Naomi, one of you guys want to go next? Okay. Henry.
My other role is I teach public school in San Francisco. I at Bessie Carmichael Middle School and the Ruth Asawa School of the Arts. And I think one of the prompt questions were how do you serve as a mentor in your community? And actually that journey has been really tough for me because it's tough for me to accept that I could be in that role. And and as a public school teacher, you have to accept that is your opportunity, that you have those opportunities to share safe moments for students to shine. And learning to accept that role has been part of my journey. And how Black Lives Matter and many social justice themes have affected my teaching. I think this summer was a tipping point, was an amazing allowance to change everything we think about and how we teach music. And I approached this year a little bit opposite from my colleagues. This was the most excited I had ever been to teach music because we were allowed to question the status quo. And this might be a once in generational type of thing to do. So to observe the repertoire that we teach and instrumentation that we teach students and the music theory the tools that we learn and the music that we analyze and the history that we need to learn of to get our degrees and to be certified, it all has bias. It all has structural bias. And this was the time, it is the time to offer different expanded programming, to confront the systematic biases within music education. And I think we all know what we're talking about. Wind ensemble and orchestral music has a wonderful history, but it has also a history of exclusion. And I took this year as an opportunity to change that. And I am lucky to be in a school community, a district with fellow colleagues, a city, a state that is in line with that. Because I could easily be in a different area in the world or in the country that does not agree. And yeah, I feel it's been incredible for me as an educator. And you know, I love my students because they've really been responsive to it. They've really been as critical as you hope young minds are, and they've been as truthful as you hope young minds are. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of collectively, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of this. There's a lot of, am I doing the right thing, right? Should I be teaching these kids like this classical repertoire? Am I doing them a disservice? Those type of things. There's a lot of questions that I have to kind of just say, well, we'll find out, because there's other things that are a little bit more important right now. And yeah, that's how Black Lives Matter and different social justice themes have really infiltrated my teaching practice. And that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Henry. Great to hear about the work you're doing. Naomi, I think we'll hear from Stephen too, and then I think we probably need to open it up for questions after that. Yeah,
Okay.
Naomi.
Yeah,
Please
I'll
share.
share. I mean, teaching and education is a huge part of my artistic practice, my music practice as well. I'm a private teacher, but I kind of think of myself as like guerrilla tactics. Like I don't really work directly for an institution, but I can get into this school over here and this school over here and do workshops. And there's pros and cons to that. You know, the pros are I get to connect with different people over the country, but the connection is brief, and I don't have that longevity and action that maybe, you know, we might have. or but I got turned off from institutions a while ago, and how hard it is to change systems. And so, at least for the time being, that's the way that I am showing up as an educator. And I really try to show up as somebody who values the relationship. And especially now I'm teaching on Zoom, and yes, musical content is important to me. But I want to having this personal connection in this relation. I want to have my students feel seen and feel heard, and model authenticity and vulnerability, to a point. I don't want to dump all my stuff on my students, but just to be real with people. And one of the things that I've been thinking about for the past several years is the idea of listening. As a musician, obviously, it's something I think about a lot, but I think it is something that is so very undervalued in our culture. You can't see it, you can't monetize it, really. I mean, I guess you can monetize listens on Spotify or something, but just truly this art of listening. How do we take in different perspectives? How do we create environments where we can really hear each other? And so one of the things that I do here in Missoula is I run an organization that sets places up for that. We do a monthly jam session, online improvisation session. It used to be in person. Right now it's online, in collaboration with a session in Seattle called the Racer Sessions. And I also teach classes through that organization. Right now we're diving into a sonic meditations and improvisation class. So using the work of Pauline Oliveros to bring in our whole sonic experience into our artistic expression and our way of being. And I'm asking my students, how does that relate to social justice? How does listening relate to that? Something that I've been asking myself as well. For the last 4 years, I've been leading workshops at different schools around mostly the Northwest, but other places as well. Because I noticed that the social justice conversation wasn't happening in music education. And it seemed really odd to me that here we are, listeners, this is what we do. This is what, when I fell in love with Black music, it was because there was this culmination or juxtaposition of individual expression with communal expression. And yet the experiences that I had in formal music and jazz education, and that I witnessed other people having, is that a lot of people's experiences were not validated. A lot of people's voices were not heard. Like Henry was saying, a lot of people's voices were not represented in the repertoire, or even, walk into a band classroom, what pictures do you see on the wall? So I started bringing these conversations in about unconscious bias and trying to bring awareness into school settings, kind of as a first step. That's like the very kind of basic first step. And I think at this moment in time, I'm reflecting on how can I perpetuate and bring this into more action. So, these workshops have been talking about unconscious bias and how to disrupt that on an individual level, even with these like environmental microaggressions about the images we see or the recordings that we're hearing, but also just the subtle things that we hear or that people say that, how can I be a bystander, someone who speaks up when, somebody else is being marginalized and their experience is not being validated, which happens every day in band classrooms or other spaces, But then also on the classroom, the bigger level of how do we disrupt it, in our bands, in our scenes as organizations and presenters, and in our institutions. And that's where, you know, I haven't been so deeply involved in an institution. I like to talk to people who are and see, you know, like what kind of you know, hiring practices do you have? Are you opening up your professor jobs to everybody, or are you just hiring your guy from, you know, that you've been playing with since you were 12, you know, or whatever. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as a musician, as a mentor, and as somebody who wants to keep learning and leaning into the discomfort of this, not like of changing the status quo, because we need new systems, we need new structures that truly validate the voices of varied experiences. And that's going to change the music too, you know. It's like, what kind of aesthetics and values are we uplifting more than others? And I think as we reimagine, recreate these structures, I think the art and the music is going to be very well served.
Thank you, Naomi. Well said. Well said. I think we're pretty much at time, and I think we want to get to some questions, but I also want to give Stephen a chance to answer this question too, because he has been working in the education space as well for Stanford Jazz Workshop. And Stephen, feel free to go into questions right after your response.
Sure, yeah. I don't think I could be as eloquent as everybody on the panel, but I mean, yeah, I'm a mentor with, you know, just my private students that I'm teaching every week. And I'm very actively now talking about how jazz is Black music and vice versa. Just having that conversation with them. And probably the other role that I have is I'm the faculty director at the Stanford Jazz Workshop. And that's kind of like a big role for me. Over the years, I've been able to have more of a say in terms of who gets hired every year for the summertime faculty at Jazz Camp. And I've been fortunate enough to inject a lot of new blood into the faculty roster. And that's probably how I've had maybe the biggest effect on, you know, just the wider community with, you know, middle schoolers, high schoolers. I'm really trying to make it so that, you know, a young Hispanic girl can come to jazz camp and see somebody that plays a jazz instrument and can really see themselves in that, or a young Black kid could come to camp and see somebody that plays their instrument and be inspired by that. I think like the conversations that I've had with people to hire those people, you know, I've definitely had to go out of my network, my own direct network, to find, you know, people that'll bring diversity to the community. And that's always an interesting conversation with people. It's sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but I've really just tried to be upfront about that. Like, hey, like who's out there? Who should I know about? And, you know, I think that work hasn't quite translated over to Slow and Steady just yet. Slow and Steady is really just like the project that Ross and I work on in the wee hours, you know, probably between the hours of like 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And we just haven't, you know, the label has just been a direct reflection of mostly just like people who have albums ready and people who are our friends who know about us. But I think Ross and I have definitely had a lot of conversations recently about how we can make phone calls to friends and be like, who's out there? Who do we need to be in touch with? And we need to have those conversations more. And I think, at least for me, that seems to be like just a clear, direct action that I can take and should be taking more. So that's all I had to say about that for now. Yeah, we should get into some questions. Hey, what's up, Amy?
The conversation was flowing so beautifully. I couldn't stop it. And I just want to say thank you all for being so forthcoming and, you know, just really speaking a lot of truth here tonight. I'm sure our audience that's here right now can appreciate it on a deep level. And then anyone who watches the replay, this is just more than we could possibly hope for in terms of where we're headed with these conversations. So thank you for your courage and just willingness to share, because that's why we're here. We have a few questions, but in the interest of time and, you know, honoring all of you and whatever you have going on after this, I just want to ask all of you, what's one social statement you'd like to share with our audiences before we close? And then also, what's a project of yours that you recommend folks tune into? Do you have something out right now, or do you have a project that really represents who you are as an artist? If you could just recommend that, that would be great. Who would like to go first? Maybe Stephen, because you're off mute.
Perfect. Okay. I mean, I would just echo what I just kind of said, just what I left off with, just like call your friends or call your mentors and have this conversation with them. If you want to diversify your community, ask them who's out there. Who do I need to know? Who do I need to connect with? I think the more we actively try to expand our community, the better. And in terms of personal projects, the very, very first Slow and Steady release was my own album. So you could look up my name and also the band name Sluggish Ensemble. So check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Who would like to leave us with some magical wisdom? There's already been so much. Valerie, yeah.
I would say that this work doesn't get done until we do the work, and that we are waiting for no one. If you have something in you that comes up when you hear the word Black, when you hear the words Black music being used together, when you are teaching Black children, or in relationship, in bands, and your other relationships with Black people, things that are coming up for you, like this is the time now in this shift to really delve deep. And Naomi was saying this also, lean into those uncomfortable places and demand change. This time, you know, the shift is going to happen regardless of what you do. You know, it's just about what sides you end up on, or you know what I mean? But what's really important is to do something and to not just allow the status quo to just continue. That being silent, that day is over. So, and if you see someone who needs support and that shine, you know, we have the light inside of us. It's very important to use it, you know, and yeah. And please look up findyourlight.community. I'd love to, you know, connect with folk that are interested in supporting Black women digitally and physically, creating safe spaces for them. Oh, and the Oakland Girl. Well, you know what I'm saying, on Slow and Steady.
Yeah, you just released an album on Friday, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah, please look up Valerie's music. It's called The Oakland Girl, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Go find it and go listen. Who would like to leave us with some more words? Thank you, Valerie.
I'll go. Vote if you can. That's a good one. Yeah. I don't know that I have anything else to add except for you know, part of leaning into this discomfort is probably to make mistakes sometimes and to mess up, and also to take accountability when you do, and that's not something I see modeled very often, and so it's difficult, but those are places I'm looking to lean into, you know, is like keep digging into the work. If I make a mistake, that means I'm digging in and I'm gonna own it, and I'm, you know, and I'm gonna keep learning and digging in, because this is uncharted territory, you know, and that's what we're talking about. And you know, just to bring it back to the original theme of mentorship, as valuable as it is, a lot of folks don't have access to it for various reasons, or don't have access to the kind of mentorship that maybe is valued from like a job standpoint, or you know, that kind of thing. And so just looking at the equity and the access for mentorship, I think, is really important for us to consider in this conversation. And you can listen to my music on Slow and Steady Records. I have an album called Live at Earshot. I also have another album called Shoebox View. And I have this really cool band with this sax player in Seattle called Syrinx Effect. And we put out an album a couple years ago, and that's spelled Syrinx Effect. And have a lot of words. So if you like vinyl, let me know, because we'd like to we'd like you to have them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Henry, Ross?
Sure. Well, thank you. First of all, thanks to, I feel so honored to have been able to talk with everyone on this panel. I respect everyone so much musically, but you know, hardly do we ever, you know, get to talk in this format, right? The real stuff. So it's great to listen to everybody. And all I'll say is, for myself, I guess it's to continue to be an ally, right? To tell yourself to constantly listen to the voices that are not being heard, and shut my mouth and listen, and allow myself to be vulnerable, like Naomi said. You're going to be making mistakes, and question yourself, and re-examine your biases that you have. The biases I have as a male, the biases I have as an Asian American, and be as open to truthful experiences as possible, and being able to change yourself for the good. And I am still having difficulty always promoting myself, so I will do what I feel more comfortable doing and promote everybody else. Go buy Ross's Brass Magic album on Slow and Steady. Go check out Steven's works on Slow and Steady. Buy Valerie's album on Slow and Steady, and check out Naomi's album on Slow and Steady, because they are all amazing. If you're interested in me, go to my high school and my middle school during the day, and you can say hi to me and see what I'm doing. Well, actually, it's all online now, so you can't do that. We got to wait a little bit. But every now and then you might see me out there. I will just say I'm lucky. I've been around a lot of great musicians and a lot of great music. And if you ever see a group called Klaxon Mutant All-Stars, say hi, and we'll say hi back to you.
Thank you, Henry. We'll patiently await your release on Slow and Steady, because we know it's a slow and steady process. Thank you. Ross?
Yeah, look out for Henry's record, 2021.
Here it comes.
It's got to be a better year than 2020. Yeah, I think I'll keep it short, because we're everyone's been hanging for a while. I would kind of just echo what Stephen was saying in his response, and just if there's artists, musicians, folks that that should be working, should be on Slow and Steady, send us names, send us contacts, put us in touch with those people. Steve and I are always trying to widen our net and just our own kind of purview of the scene in the Bay Area and outside the Bay Area along the whole West Coast. So we're very open to submissions and to connecting with folks that we aren't already connected with. So I just want to echo that, and you can reach out to our personal, you can reach out, go to slowandsteadyrecords.com. There's a contact that'll go to Stephen and I there too. So I just wanted to echo that, and you know, we mean it and we're committed to it. You know, go listen to Henry's record when it comes out next year. The only other thing I'll plug is next week, I think, a week after this Friday, I think, the Jazz Mafia crew is putting out a record called Say Something, Do Something. It's all politically inspired. And a lot of it actually has been created from everyone's respective home studios. So it's been a fun way to stay connected with the larger community from, you know, LA up to the Bay. And it's been meaningful to put energy towards something that has some teeth and a message that is very, very important. As Naomi said, vote, and just be, you know, engaged and active, and do what you can. There's a lot of decisions, I think, in front of us that can leave a great legacy if we wanted to. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Amy, and everybody at San Jose Jazz for having us.
Thank you so much, Slow and Steady Records. This has just been above and beyond, and whether you feel qualified or not, you've all served as a mentor for our greater community just in this conversation tonight. So thank you. And please check out their music, support our Bay Area artists and beyond. Obviously, the West Coast music, we've got a lot of wonderful things happening. And thank you again to San Jose Jazz and the artist-led committee who made this conversation possible. Join us next Tuesday, October 20th for session 2 of Backstage. We've got a great conversation about mentorship in education specifically. And then this Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, tune in for San Jose Jazz Live from Home featuring the Villalobos brothers. And thank you so much. We will see you next week for San Jose Jazz Backstage. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.